In our virtual learning models so far, we've really kind of been able to present and go through class topics without really a lecture. I probably should have lectured on inequalities and privilege, but I tried to provide aspects of the concept in the module itself, and hopefully that worked well for everybody. But when we get to this particular topic, I really feel like we need to have a little bit of a conversation, and maybe by conversation is I feel like I really need to talk to you. So hi everybody, here's my annoying voice hovering over a PowerPoint, and thanks for taking the time to listen. So this week, we're going to talk about in our discussion board all the care work that is done in a family. And if we were together in class, I do this a few different ways, but what I usually have the class starting out to do is I either bring crayons in and you each get a separate like half sheet of paper where you draw a picture of any house and any family that you want. Depending on the classroom, like we couldn't do it in the classroom we were in because there was only one whiteboard. But if I end up in a classroom with like 2 or 3 walls worth of whiteboards, of course I have sets of different colored dry erase markers because I live the dream of having all the office and art supplies for my classes that I'd love to have. So I would send each group, like every single group would be up at the boards all at the exact same time, like everybody be standing at the board. You draw a house and a family up there. And so that's just intended to be kind of a lighthearted way to get started with the activity. But the real work of the activity is I want you to brainstorm all of the tasks that a house and a family need. And I mean, it doesn't have to be the place that you live. So it's not necessarily, a 3 bedroom house. It very well could be a 1 bedroom apartment. But what's the space that you need to take care of? And who are the people, including yourself, that you need to take care of? And so let's start to talk about that a little bit and let me kind of overwhelm you with thinking through all the different things that a house and a family need because I'm used to doing this from this activity. And in all honesty, I'm used to doing this because as a person who's been an adult for, I don't know, 23 years, I always consider adulthood starting when I was pregnant with Mac. I've been doing a lot of this care work for a very long time. So a lot of times people will conceptualize like, well, you need to clean the house. Well, let's go through and talk about all the tasks involved in cleaning a house. So we're going to start in the kitchen. And you need to wipe off the counters. You need to do the dishes. How many times a day do you need to do the dishes? And how many times a day do you need to wipe off the counter? And you need to probably wipe off the stove decently often if you're cooking. You need to wash dishes again. You need to dry dishes. You need to load the dishwasher. You need to unload the dishwasher. You need to wipe down the appliances like the microwave and clean out the refrigerator, both the contents inside and then kind of wipe it down inside. And granted, you're not going to be cleaning out the refrigerator as often as you're doing dishes unless you're an amazing person with a really, really clean fridge. I am not one of you. My fridge is decent, but I have to say one of the things that does make me feel really highly capable in this world is like when I open my fridge and it's all like really nicely organized. But I'm really big on having everything really nicely organized, but that's here nor there. You need to clean the floors. You need to sweep the floors or vacuum the floors and then probably mop the floors or scrub the floors. You need to kind of wipe down the kitchen cabinets. They get all grimy. If you have an oven hood, you've got to wipe that down. Like there's a fair amount of stuff. If there's, a kitchen window and things like that that's by a kitchen sink, you need to kind of clean that because it's going to get splatters. And then, by the way, did I mention you need to wipe down the counters again? And then you need to wipe down the counters 15 more times. You need to scrub that kitchen sink. Can you see where this gets overwhelming when you really think about it? Let's go into, the living room or family room or shared space that you have. Things need to be picked up. Things need to be dusted. Things need to be swept or vacuumed. Things along those lines. You need, there's oftentimes doors with like door sills or window sills that kind of get grimy and need to be wiped down. Um, I'm like literally thinking through, I'm upstairs in my house, but like thinking through downstairs. There's the laundry room, which means you have all of that laundry to do. And it's funny when we do this and students start listing out the various aspects of this activity, I usually get into arguments with students about laundry because by and large, students at the age that they're at in the lifetime that they're, the spot in their life that they're living, they think of laundry as their own laundry. So think about if you were to think, how long does it take to do laundry each week or each month? And a lot of times I'll have students say, well, it takes, I don't know, about an hour a week. Well, yeah, I guess if you're doing, because laundry's weird, you don't sit in front of the washing machine and watch it go, but You run it through the washer or the dryer. Maybe there's some stuff that you hang up to air dry. And then you have to, fold or put it away. Occasionally there's something to iron or something along those lines. So it can be a lot more. Well, when you're talking about the context of a family where you've got, two, maybe even three kids, you've got a couple of parents or even a single parent family with a couple of kids, that's a lot more laundry. Like a lot of times, students aren't always thinking about the fact that there's going to be loads of sheets, there's going to be loads of towels, there's going to be loads of possibly soccer uniforms, there's going to be a dog or a cat that has a bed and, a blanket on it to cuddle into, or it gets a bath or something and needs that wash. There's going to be loads of rags. There's going to be, somebody wet the bed or somebody really needs their purple shirt for Purple Shirt Thursday. Like there's a lot of laundry that takes place. Are you overwhelmed yet? Should I keep going? Think about all the things that need to be done on behalf of a family as far as like errands, and those have changed drastically, drastically in the time that we're living in. Things like grocery lists, that brings up so much anxiety within me because at this point, with safety and concerns and staying at home and all of these various things, like there's not a, hey, I forgot it at the grocery store kind of leniency in our lives anymore. So that idea of you need to put together, you need to inventory what you have, you need to put together a grocery list, you need to go shopping for those groceries. A lot of times previous to the times that we were living in, many families don't go to just one grocery store. They might go to two, or they might go to a grocery store and Costco, things along those lines. They might go to a grocery store and Target. Like you're going multiple places, and then you need to come home and put all of that away. So you got to keep that inventory. You got to plan ahead. You've got to plan meals. You've got to cook those meals. You've got to pack lunches. Can you see why I didn't just put this all into a module? Because this module would be like 2 miles long because I would never shut up. Well, did you think about this? And what about that? What about all the housework outside? What about paying the bills? What about helping? I mean, we haven't even barely touched the fact that in a family, oftentimes there are children, and those children need to be watched. Those children need to be entertained. Those children need to be played with. Those children need help with schoolwork. What, again, I've turned to, are we living in nowadays with all schools being on a virtual learning model? How many parents are there that I know you know darn well and very well in some cases you are helping and or the parent yourself, I know, but helping your family members navigate all of the schoolwork that students need to be doing, young elementary students, kindergarten, and like all of those types of things. So much work. And so often when I start with this rapid fire, well, what about this? Well, what about that? Did you remember this? Did you remember that? Students are like, oh yeah, I didn't even think about it. Well, why didn't you think about it? Because this work is kind of invisible. You know who thinks about it? Who knows about it? Who can list all this? A lot of times parents, especially moms, because this is still fairly gendered work. I once had in my summer school classes that I get to teach at the community college an in-person class. Now they kind of have moved to more online classes, even previous to the times that we're living in with virtual learning. But I had a mom in the class that had like 6 kids, I kid you not. And so, and quite honestly, anytime that I have any students in the class that are parents, especially moms, and they sit down to do this activity, because I would have you brainstorm all the tasks, and then I would have you decide how often those tasks need to be done, each one of them. And then I would have you decide who in the family is most likely to do this task, and you have to figure that out. Then I would have you decide how much time do you spend wiping down counters or washing dishes or walking the dog or helping a kid with homework. How much time do you spend a month? I would have you figure that out. And then I would finally have you figure out if you had to pay somebody for that task to complete, to scrub your toilets or to vacuum your floors or to dust your house, just that task, just itemize that task. And if you had to pay somebody an hourly rate that's at least minimum wage, and in some cases more, how much would that task be worth a month? And it's funny because you go around these classrooms a lot of times and students will be like, oh my gosh, we've added up like $2,000 a month. And every once in a while, I'll get a group that's like, no, our expenses for how much all of this work is worth is like $6,000. And the class is like, no way. And you're right. No way. Like, because it's actually way more. My point though, with like the mom that had 6 kids in my class, is whenever I have people in the class that are parents, or possibly because they're an older brother or sister, like a sibling that has younger brothers or sisters, a lot of students, no matter their age or stage, are involved in caretaking, possibly caretaking for, older adults in your family, because so much of elderly care and individuals who might be enduring an illness or something along those lines, that work is done at home. And it's technically in our society worth nothing, worth nothing. And we act like it as a society. And that's what we're getting at with the second shift. I want you to think about, and you're going to be asked in the discussion board, think through, like, who did this work in your family? What are your thoughts about this? How should this be? There's a lot to unpack here. And it's really, really important because it's so often, like I've said, ignored. People who do it can't ignore it, and they don't. And again, I will go back because I never finished saying the student in the class that had 6 kids, when I came around, and it's a sheet that I of course give you because you're so used to getting a worksheet from me, like, and there's probably 25 if not 30 lines on the sheet, like enough lines that you never get through even more than a quarter of this activity in the time that we usually have. Her sheet of tasks went like totally filled and onto the back. Like, she basically said to her group, like, here, hand me that, and just kept writing tasks because she knew all of them, because she was doing them all. They weren't invisible to her. She was busy doing them. And partially, like I said, that's part of the reason I can walk you through all the things I was able to kind of rapid fire walk you through. I'm snapping my fingers. That's might have what you heard, because this work exists for so many people. Okay, you've been staring at the Starn slide for freaking forever. Let's go through and quickly talk about what the second shift is. This is longitudinal research, not longitudinal, but ethnographic research. I was using the wrong research word. Longitudinal is when you, although it should be interesting, she should do longitudinal research. Longitudinal research is when you take a group of individuals and study them in time periods continuing on. So like if you were to start studying students when they're in the 2nd grade, you revisit them when they're in the 5th grade, you revisit them when they're in the 8th grade. If you were to start studying families, you study them right now, you'd go back and study them again in a couple years, something along those lines. So that's what longitudinal is. This is actually ethnographic. And ethnographic research is when you try and like observe and kind of almost become a part of what you're observing. And so Arlie Hochschild and a couple, at least one, if not a couple of graduate assistants did, I think it was 12 years of research from 1976 to 1988, and then the second shift was published in 1989. They did 12 years of ethnographic research, researching families, and I want you to think back to the Maker series, right? So we saw this time period. We saw the concept. Arlie Hochschild is interviewed in the Maker series. I know you don't know, that then. It says like Arlie Hochschild, sociologist, but she's actually interviewed in the 3rd video that we watched. And so the idea with that, remember the woman with the flying hair? I think that was actually Arlie Hochschild that brought that up. That, she's so capable out in the world of, the economy and commerce and her job and everything else. But then she comes home, and that's where the concept, the second shift, came from. That she actually had one of the families she was researching say, I go to work and I work a shift, and then I come home and it's like I have a whole nother shift. And so the definition of the concept is, as you can see in front of you, there's a dual burden. So women get paid oftentimes for work outside the home, but then there's the unpaid work experienced by working women inside the home. And let's kind of pause on this for a quick second and think about the fact that who was she studying, right? Because this is not a very diverse research project by any means. Who was the group of women that were all of a sudden, their lives were changing so much because they were working outside the home? White middle class women, right? So women who have been grappling with lower socioeconomic status from working class families, it has always been a matter of survival. Working was never like, we're fighting so that we can be out in the workplace. No, that was always a given. And then also, she was looking at families. This means they were heteronormative families. This means that they were male-female relationships. And that's also important because I think with the diversity of relationships nowadays and with marriage equality as it is, that I think that hopefully that has changed in some ways the dynamics of families and the division of labor. So, but when Arlie Hochschild was studying this now 40 years ago, more than 40 years ago, that women had that one shift at work and a second shift at home. And what she found is women were working 15 hours longer than men each week, as you can see, which, I mean, I guess it doesn't sound too terribly awful, right? It's a couple hours a day or so, but that means that you are maybe losing out on some sleep. That maybe means that you're not getting to sit down and watch your favorite show. That might mean that, you don't get a chance to meet a friend for coffee, things along those lines. It adds up. And so actually, let's talk about it adding up. Because if you take 15 times 52, the number of weeks in a year, it actually means over a year, women are working in the home in her research one full month of 24-hour days. So let's take a look at my watch. It is 3:29 on April 16th, Thursday, April 16th, when I'm sitting in my room recording this. And so let's think through, and I don't know, think about whatever minute it is on whatever day in next week that you end up listening to this. Um, think through if you were to start working that exact minute and you work straight through round the clock 24 hours a day until, in my case, May 16th at 3:29 p.m. Right? So, and you do this every single year. It's not like you just do this once. So it's an inordinate amount of work. I often share with my students, one of my good friends, I'm lucky to have such awesome friends. And I have friends actually. I have a group of 3 moms who are my age, but all of their kids are like 10 years younger than Mac because I had Mac when I was so young. But when I talk about the fact that I teach the second shift and we talk about domestic work in my classes, they're always like, can we come in and be a panel? Like to set students straight. It's like about all the work that needs to be done. And so one of the things that we talk about too is laundry and all of the laundry that families make and things along those lines. So one of these friends, Mary, who has 3 kids and is a high school Spanish teacher, she, as the kids were growing up, now they're like tweenish, right? They're maybe 11, 12, 14, somewhere in there, like the 3 kids. When they were younger, and quite honestly, she still might be doing this sometimes, I guess, she would get them to sleep and then she would wake up herself, like maybe because she'd fall asleep, putting them to bed, like laying down in bed with them, reading them a story or something. She would routinely, though, either way, or if she dozed off on the couch, she would wake up at like, I don't know, midnight, 12:30 in the morning, and she would get up and work around the house, packing lunches, doing a load of laundry, cleaning stuff up for like a couple of hours. And then she would go back to sleep at like 2:30 in the morning and be up for the day, at 5:30, 6 o'clock, because she's got to get 3 kids out the door to school and get herself to school, and teachers start early. She would do this for years because those hours in the middle of the night, nobody needed her. So she could crank that shit out. Like she could get so much done. But think about the fact, like this idea that all of this work is being done oftentimes, sometimes around the clock. Next week, we're going to talk about the workplace wage gap, and we will have a lot to unpack there. But then the workplace wage gap very much exists for many reasons, and we'll talk about it then. But this really means that there's a leisure gap at home. Again, not necessarily getting to sit down and watch your favorite shows or doing things that you might enjoy because you're busy doing all of this work. Okay, so remember how I told you that some groups would do all of this math, like literally you have you have your phones out, calculators on your phone out, and you're doing all this. Okay, so let's think this through. If washing dishes, you've decided that you spend, oh gosh, let's say 45 minutes a day. I'm actually grabbing my phone to do the calculator. So 45 minutes a day, once I find my calculator, times 30 days in a month, right? So that's 1,350 minutes, and you divide it by 60, because that's hours. You spend 22 and a half hours washing dishes a month if you do it for 45 minutes a day. And some of you might be like, 45 minutes a day? Yeah, if you're cooking a lot, 45 minutes, even if you have a dishwasher, but loading and unloading and loading that dishwasher again, and then washing the things that can't go in a dishwasher, don't get me started. So let's say in this particular instance, washing dishes would be a career, a job. If you were to pay somebody outside your house, you'd need to pay them, of course, at least minimum wage, but it would be right around minimum wage. So let's say, because minimum wage can kind of fluctuate depending on where you're at. Let's say minimum wage is $12.50. So that means you'd be paying $281.25 for somebody to just wash your dishes every day for a month. So when students kind of do this with every single task I talk about, driving kids to school, doing yard work, like I mentioned, walking the dog, all these things, and go around again to that group that's like, it's like $6,000. And students are like, there's no way. Well, here, let's take a look, because salary.com every single year has tried to conceptualize how much work this is worth. So here we go. In 2016, because I'm going to take you through the last few years, you can see right in that box she's holding up, this is a stay-at-home mom. you can see how much all this work is worth. And what they have tried to do is they have tried to get averages from parents of how much time they spend on each task, what all the tasks are, and then they go to the median income level for that career and they try to conceptualize how much this work is worth. 2016, $143,000. This is just the second shift. This is the last year that they only that they looked at both of them. So a working mom who's working outside the home is still all the work she's doing inside the home, $90,000, as you can see her holding up. And take a second and kind of read through the traditional mom jobs, the modern mom jobs, to kind of see even things I didn't mention. You have to be an IT person because, well, especially nowadays, you're signing your second grader into Zoom. Like there's so much stuff that has to be taken care of as far as care work in a home. Okay, we're going to keep going. 2017 now. Now we're just looking at they only do a stay-at-home mom, but it's worth $157,000. 2018, $162,000. Can you imagine? Can you imagine a check showing up at your house for $162,000? How many of you would be like, bring it on? How many of you would be like, I'll take $1,600? How many of you would be like, I'll take $16? Because we do not get paid for any of this. Nobody does. And our society, because of that, because we link value in a career and we link the definition of work to it earning money. It's a capitalistic model that we have. And so thinking through like how much this work is worth, because $162,000, I'm grabbing that calculator again, and 581 divided by 12, is that right? I'm doing it one more time. Bear with me. I don't want to tell you wrong. Okay, I need to look. Okay. And then, no. I'm doing it wrong. I put a decimal point when I don't need to. So now you can see how highly capable I am at doing math. Okay, divided by 12. Are you ready? It's $13,000 a month. It's a ton of money. Okay, the last year that they've conceptualized, and this is the way that they did the image this year. They didn't do it the other ways, and I'm not quite sure why. But you can see now, $178,000. So even more than $13,000 a month. Holy moly. The work is being done all the time. And who's it being done by? I am in a situation in my life, in my family, in my marriage, where in a heteronormative marriage, which I always feel guilty that my examples are heteronormative, but that is the relationship that I have a spouse, Sean, who you got to meet, thankfully, right before everything went awry, who does an inordinate amount of like domestic work around the house, and not just baking cookies. Like Sean does everything. Quite honestly, I will admit, Sean did laundry so much for years that when we had to get our washer and dryer replaced about 3 years ago, I didn't know how to use it for the first 2 years. Like I would have to call him and be like, what buttons do you press? Because that's how much laundry he would do and that I wouldn't do. And I'm so glad I don't have you in front of me because I couldn't look at you while I say this because I'm just ashamed of myself. But I would hear all the time, because Sean does so much and Sean is so highly capable, I would hear all the time about how lucky I am. And don't get me wrong, I know I am incredibly lucky. But my sister, my mom, my neighbors, I'm so lucky because Sean's so great. Flip the script on that. Can you imagine if Sean were at school? And granted, we're on virtual learning all around here all the time, but imagine if he were at school having lunch with his fellow colleague teachers, and you were talking about all the stuff that needed to be done around the house, and they were to hear that Nora does all the laundry and she irons too. Oh my gosh, she vacuums every week or twice a week or whatever it is. You're so lucky. He would never hear that, because the default mechanism, the assumption is that I do, like that somebody who is feminine, somebody who is female, does the domestic work. It's an outlier still to a certain extent to have somebody who is masculine or male. Not always. But there's still an element of that, and that has cultural implications and things along those lines. And so there's a lot to think about. Okay, very last concept that I want to cover with you, because I know I've gone on and on, but this is just one of those concepts that there is an inordinate amount of autonomy that you have when you invest the time to think about this and listen to me talk way too fast. Like this matters. This matters in your life right now, and it certainly matters as you go forward in next generations. Think about what you have experienced in families and what you think needs to be experienced in families. Think about how you need and want to socialize possibly future generations of children, male, female, or otherwise, that think through, all of this work that needs to be done and the value of it. and how we don't value it. And we can't change society necessarily on such a large scale to make society value this work. And no checks are going to be arriving at our house. But you have an inordinate amount of power in this way to make decisions for yourself in the way that your life surrounds this kind of care work. So anyways, like I said, last thing, Arlie Hochschild would find oftentimes that there would be women that she would be studying, and she would hang out at their houses a couple of times a week. That's how she kind of did her ethnographic research. She'd show up as everybody was getting home from work and just kind of, chat with them before dinner or something. She would routinely find that women who were living very parallel lives, like they had the same number of kids, they had a spouse that helped and or didn't help around the house in an equal amount, they had a job with similar stressors or not stressors, that type of thing. She would see women that have very seemingly similar lives, but some of these women, oh my gosh, they were just completely overwhelmed and they were just kind of negative and dragging themselves through life in some ways. And other women that were living very similar lives would be upbeat and would kind of report a high level of satisfaction with their life. And so Arlie Hochschild, I kind of feel like I always need to say her name in its entirety, as if, I can't say Arlie and I don't want to say, Dr. Hochschild. She's got to have a PhD. She tried to figure out what would be, granted there's personality and psychology involved, but what might be a factor that would make a big difference in the way that these women viewed their lives. And she found one. And it's actually 2 words. And when you think about it, because I have you watch the video, and I don't know if you've watched the video, the job interview video, but this gets addressed in the interview because the job interview video is a Mother's Day card commercial, actually. The thing that she found made such a difference was thank you. The women that reported a high level of satisfaction were being thanked for the efforts on behalf of their family. They were being thanked when people sat down to dinner. They were being thanked when, clothes got delivered to their room to be put away. They were this work wasn't invisible. It was valued in their homes. No matter who was doing it or how, the work was valued. And in the women that were really struggling in some ways to be satisfied with their life, the work remained invisible. We have a lot of control in that situation. Maybe you are a person that has been caring for yourself and doing all these tasks for yourself for years, and maybe quite honestly, you are doing them currently and have been for others. But for some of you, maybe some people in your lives, mothers, fathers, grandparents, family members, older siblings, have been doing so much of this care work for you, and maybe still in some ways do it today. Have you thanked them? Have you told them about the fact that you know that this is worth a lot? Because this particular sharing of these concepts really is an opportunity for you to say, oh my gosh, I learned in my Women and Gender Studies class that everything you do is worth $178,000 a year. That's an inordinate amount of work. Thank you. And if you're the person doing it for yourself, really value this. See this as what it is. It's not going away anytime soon. There's always going to be a toilet to scrub and a floor to vacuum. But the way that we visualize it, the way that we see it, the way that we value it is something that we very much, all of us, could create a lot of change around.